The CIA had no involvement in the break-in, declared the duly sworn witness Richard Helms, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, his voice starting to rise. Helms spoke to 7 U.S. senators seated at the desks not 10 feet in front of him. No involvement whatever, Helms emphasized with a broadside of rattling consonants, and it was my preoccupation consistently from then to this time to make this point and to be sure that everybody understands it. Helms, a saturnine scion of Philadelphia's main line, 60 years of age, sat forward at the wooden witness table. His long slate-gray hair curled over the collar of his silk suit jacket. Filaments of silver glistened on his temples in the glare of white TV lights. His jaw was firm and active. He was surrounded by hundreds of spectators crowded into room 318 of the Russell Senate Office Building in Washington, D.C. The televised hearings of the Senate Watergate Committee, formerly known as the Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities in 1972, were high political theater in America that summer, though not quite the hot ticket they had been a few months before. When the TV cameras swung his way, Helms bared his teeth in a grin. Anticipation accompanied the witness. Richard Helms had served as Director of Central Intelligence for almost 7 years, from June 1966 until January 1973, when President Richard Nixon named him U.S. Ambassador to Iran. He was making his 5th appearance before a congressional committee, but this was his first full public accounting of the agency's role in the scandal that had already forced the resignation of Nixon's Chief of Staff, H.R. Haldeman, and his Chief Domestic Policy Advisor, John Ehrlichman. Despite a year of intensive news coverage, first by the Washington Post and then by the rest of the Washington press corps, the role of America's clandestine service in the Watergate burglary was still murky. CIA directors never testified in open session, much less about a domestic political crime committed by former agency employees. The witness caught the crowd by surprise. With one hand, he clasped the microphone at its base. With the other, he chopped the table with his neatly aligned fingers, and his voice rose still further. It doesn't seem to get across very well for some reason, but the agency, thump, had nothing, thump, to do, thump, with the Watergate break-in, he shouted. The murmur of talk in the far reaches of the hearing room was stilled as his words resounded to the high ceiling. No involvement whatever. Helms surveyed the faces around him. "I hope all the newsmen in the room hear me clearly now." They did. The CBS Evening News and ABC News both led their coverage of the hearing with footage of Helms' bravura outburst. A front-page story in the New York Times declared, "Helms says he resisted pressure by White House for CIA cover-up aid." The Washington Post lauded his appearance with the headline, "Helms displays his old skills as a diplomat." Senior Post reporter Lou Cannon wrote that the quiet and aristocratic professional who ran the CIA during President Nixon's first term displayed a strange sadness about pressure from the White House. That was a story many people wanted to believe as the Watergate affair consumed Washington, the law-abiding CIA director as an innocent bystander to a lawless president. Empirically speaking, Helms's claim that the agency had no involvement in the break-in was dubious. 4 of the 7 men arrested at the Watergate office complex in the early hours of June 17, 1972, had worked on or collaborated with CIA operations to overthrow the government of Cuba. A 5th burglar had held a senior position in the agency's internal police force, the Office of Security. No involvement implied no connection or association with the burglary. Yet 2 of the burglars, Howard Hunt and James McCord, had retired from the agency 2 years before and gone into business with Helms' personal blessing and CIA institutional support. The agency's statement, reported as fact, that Hunt and McCord were former employees with whom we have had no dealings since their retirement, was simply false.